But even the Quran is vulnerable to change and distortion. If not in its original Arabic, then certainly in translation. The King Fahd printing press in Medina, Saudi Arabia has the capacity to publish 10 million Qurans a year in Arabic and 44 other languages. These are distributed around the world well below cost, and in some cases, free of charge. And it's fascinating to see how the Saudi religious establishment has augmented the text. They have inserted in brackets, such as the Jews, and such as the Christians, into verses that refer to people who have earned God's anger and gone astray, and into the verse calling upon the faithful to make their armaments ready against the enemies of Islam. The translator has made another insertion: tanks, planes, missiles, and artillery. Any suggestion of distortion in the text is highly contentious because of the special significance of the Quran in the minds of Muslims. Unlike most Christians and Jews who believe their sacred texts were authored by men inspired by God, Muslims believe the Quran is the Word of God as dictated to the Prophet Muhammad. This distinction means that critical analysis of the sacred texts becomes an extremely sensitive issue when applied to the Quran. And the problem is compounded when some of the scholars making the attempt are Western non-Muslims. Are they really in a position to shed new light on the text and its origins? In 1972, during the restoration of the Great Mosque of Sana'a, capital of North Yemen, workers discovered piles of old parchments in the loft between the inner and outer roofs. The entire load was stuffed into some 20 potato sacks, where it might have remained were it not for the arrival 7 years later of Dr. Gerd Puin, a German scholar and Quranic expert. Puin immediately grasped the significance of the find. Working with a team of local assistants, he carefully pried the layers apart and fired off thousands of photographs. 4 fragments immediately caught Puin's attention. They contained the first and last chapters of the Quran, and unlike any other Qurans in existence, they were illustrated with architectural drawings of mosques, a vital clue to their origin. The oldest datable Quran in the world, created some 70 years after the death of the Prophet. From the potato sacks, Puin identified fragments from nearly 1,000 different Qurans. Comparisons between them and the standard Cairo text in use today are startling. These early texts are written in a kind of shorthand, with no vowel markings or distinguishing dots, which means that individual words can have up to 30 different meanings.
Es ist tatsächlich so, dass man durch die schiere Existenz,
the sheer existence of so many different possible readings would suggest that this text wasn't passed down word for word.
Der Text eben nicht wortwörtlich überliefert.
The text isn't as stable as it seems in the Cairo version.
In der Fassung von Kairo erscheint.
Muslim scholars today argue that the integrity of every word of the text has been perfectly preserved through the oral tradition. But the written Quran shows variation. Forensic examination of the Sana''s fragments revealed earlier texts that had been washed off and rewritten. Although the hidden text revealed no contradictory meanings, words had been changed, verses and whole chapters rearranged. Suggestions that different versions of the Quran show any variation in word meanings and chapter arrangements are highly controversial in the Muslim world. A book written by an expert in early Semitic languages was so divisive that the author published under the pseudonym Christoph Luxemburg and will only speak on condition that his identity remains concealed.
Unbedingt erforderlich, den Koran neu zu lesen. In order to understand it correctly, we need a fundamentally new interpretation and reading of the Quran.
Dr. Marcus Gross helped to translate the book from its original German into English and is willing openly to express the author's views.
A quarter or a fifth of the Quran contains words which have been misunderstood, or words which don't make real sense. That number can be vastly reduced with a knowledge of Syriac to, let's say, 5%.
Syriac, or Syro-Aramaic, had become one of the dominant languages of Christian liturgy by the 3rd century. Christ spoke Aramaic, and it can still be heard in remote Christian communities like this town of Malula in Syria. But at the time of Muhammad, Syro-Aramaic was the major written and cultural language of the whole region. Written Arabic was in its infancy.
I take into consideration the meaning of the root, of the corresponding root in Syriac, or a possible misreading. Misreading in this case means that the undotted text was dotted wrongly. Then there's also the possibility that a Syriac letter was by mistake written within an Arabic text.
Using these methods, Luxemburg examined some of the most obscure passages of the Quran. After Mary has given birth to Jesus, in the Arabic Quran, the angel says to her, "Be not sad, your Lord has placed a rivulet beneath you." In Luxemburg's version, "Be not sad, your Lord has made your delivery legitimate." And there are other examples. God's command to a skeptic in Arabic, "Look at your food and drink, look at your ass," becomes "Look at your condition, look at your overall state." At the end of the world, the earth steps forward in Arabic. In Syriac, the earth splits open. Luxemburg's references to paradise cause great offense. In the Iranian city of Isfahan, there's a 17th century palace built to represent the gates of heaven. The cool greens of the gardens beyond express the longings of a desert people and are beautifully described in the Quran, along with flowing fountains and the favors of houris, usually understood as wide-eyed virgins. One commentary, but not the Quran, even specifies numbers, 72 for each righteous man. But that doesn't sit well with 7 verses of the Quran that promise the righteous eternal contentment with their wives. Luxemburg believes he has resolved this contradiction.
There's one passage in the Quran dealing with the houris, in which it says, وَزَوَجْنَاهُمْ بِحُورٍ عِينٍ. We have paired them with dark, wide-eyed maidens. That is the traditional understanding of this verse. If you put the dots on the undotted text a little bit differently, what comes out is, "We will make you comfortable under white, crystal-clear grapes."
For the suicide bomber, this means a reward of grapes and not of 72 virgins in paradise. The connection with Christian symbolism is so controversial to some. This 5th century mural in an Egyptian monastery depicts the archangels receiving souls in paradise. Each archangel holds a grape in one hand, and in the other cradles the departed souls, who are refreshed with bunches of grapes. The grape motif is repeated in the vestments of the priests of the Syrian Orthodox Church, all relating back to Christ's promise to his disciples at the Last Supper that he will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until he is reunited with them in his Father's kingdom. Although Luxemburg's work has been called into question by leading academics and has not been independently corroborated, he believes it opens a door, encouraging linguists, archaeologists, and historians to use modern tools to throw further light on the text and its context.